Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today on the Mindful Constitution podcast. I have my friend Lorenzo Lugo here, who is actually a fellow Bostonian, although we've never met in real life, which is kind of cool, kind of funny, kind of ironic. We both live like 30 minutes away from each other. He's also an integrative health practitioner and fellow lover of functional medicine. So today we're going to be diving into all things holistic health, functional medicine, talking about the systems of healthcare we currently have and how we can optimize them. So welcome, sir. How are you today?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm great. How are you?
Doing good. Doing good. You know what I was thinking? That's really funny, actually, when before we got on, I was like, yeah, we're recording today. And by the time I release this podcast, I might have a real human.
Wow.
Because I won't be releasing it for a month or so, 2 months. So the baby could be here by the time this episode releases.
That's so exciting. A birth of two things. Actually, so a birth of the baby and a birth of my first podcast interview.
Yes.
So, congratulations to both of us and thank you.
Yes.
Thank you again for having me.
So exciting. I know. I'm very flattered that I was able to talk you into coming on. And I know we've had tons of interesting conversations outside of this podcast episode. So I'm really excited for you to share your perspective on holistic health and functional medicine, etc. But first, before we dive in, so tell us a little bit about how do you explain an integrative health practitioner? And beyond that, I really want to hear, before we get into the nitty gritty, how you got into integrative health and what drew you to this line of work.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a long story, but what got me to the stage that I'm at now as an integrative health practitioner is really just when I was 17 years old, I played football. Mm-hmm. And I was a high performance athlete. I, not to brag or boast, but I was very talented at what I did. I was blessed with good genetics and just hard work. Mm-hmm. And I always excelled. I was always in the top % of athletes in my teams. I was captain, good leadership skills. Most of my short career as a adolescent and teenager, but
glory days.
What's that?
The glory days.
The glory days, right? But when I was 17 years old, I started to get chronic knee pains, and I didn't know why. But I asked myself an important question, which I think a lot of people do that get into natural health, and I encourage people to ask, is why do I have this symptom, or why do I have this, quote, dis-ease? Mm-hmm. Because I was diagnosed with patellar tendonitis. And anytime a dis-ease ends with itis, typically it's inflammatory in nature. So I did what anyone would normally do. I went to seek conventional medicine modalities, and they put me on physical therapy. They had me doing icing and specific exercises, but it wasn't effective. I committed to it. It wasn't effective. The pain never went away. And it was a big shot to my ego. I started to get anxiety. I didn't feel like myself anymore, Mm-hmm. And I think that was a big shot to my ego as a teenager, because my whole identity was being this
athlete,
exactly. And really succeeding well in sports. So funny enough, I was watching an infomercial one day when I was kind of done with my football career. And there's icing my knees, right? There's this guy, infomercial guy on the TV. His name is Kevin Trudeau. And he wrote a book called Natural Cures They Don't Want You to Know About. And they being government, big pharma, people who have a vested or financial interest in you not needing their services. or you needing their services, right? They don't get paid if you don't need their services. So I'm like, all right, I'll pick up this book. What else do I have to lose? Nothing else is working. I have low mood. I'm depressed. I'm anxious. My knees are shot. So I read the book, and he talked about a lot of foundational stuff. He talked about symptom treatment, just treating the symptoms rather than looking for what is leading to the symptoms in the first place. The root cause to what we call diseases. And it just made so much sense that I decided to basically, read out the book and start to practice some of the modalities. So everything that I implemented with my dietary and lifestyle changes, supplementation, it worked. Like, it really worked. It could have been at the time that I didn't have enough omega-3s. I didn't really know. It was just sort of a shot in the dark. But anyway, to make a long story short, that basically grew my passion for natural health, that I began to start reading books, and I got certified as a health coach and with IIN, the Institute of Integrative Nutrition.
Oh, yeah.
But you went there too. Yeah. Great school. But I just felt like there was a missing piece of identifying those underlying root cause imbalances. And that's when I started doing more digging, and I heard about IHP. So an integrative health practitioner is someone who, or at least a level 2, which is what I am currently. There's a level 3 as well for like mindset and stuff. But level 1, you go through the entire de-stress protocol, which is foundational stuff like diet, exercise, stress reduction, toxin removal, rest and sleep, and emotional balance, science-backed supplements, and success mindset. So you get to learn holistically about how to really get the body well from all different modalities like naturopathy, Ayurveda, bioregulatory medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurveda. It's a very integrative approach. But then level 2, we learn about functional medicine lab testing, which is more than just blood work. And it includes saliva testing, it includes stool testing, urine testing, and even hair testing to identify what those underlying root cause imbalances are that then lead to dis-ease in the first place. Right. So I worked with a coach, an integrative health practitioner, and they helped me rebalance a lot of issues. I had digestive issues where I couldn't even digest fats after eating like olive oil. Just like a simple dressing over a salad, I would like run to the bathroom. Not to be gross, but it just went right through me, literally.
Poop talk is welcome.
Okay, good. And she helped me rebalance those issues. So as soon as I started to get well and realized that this was like the key piece of the pie or the puzzle that I was missing, I said, I need to become this myself, and I need to help others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You did such a good job of explaining root cause versus symptom treatment, and how, a lot of functional lab testing helps to identify those root cause. I've done a lot of them too myself. Just my background's in functional medicine as well, not through IIN, but through University of Western States. So I did nutrition and functional medicine and then IIN. So we have similar educational combinations, just different schools, I guess.
Yes.
But yeah, it's really interesting too, because what you had said about not digesting fats or whatever, a lot of times had you been going to a conventional doctor, they would have just been like, yeah, that's IBS. Eat some fiber. Good luck. Whereas I think when you're dealing with functional medicine, it's more so like, okay, why aren't you digesting fats? Like, what's going wrong there that we need to resolve from the foundational level, and just really highlights the difference between, conventional medicine and functional medicine, where a lot of times, like you said in the book, what was it called again?
The natural cures they don't want you to know about.
They, yeah, they. But it's really one of the main differences, I would say, and I would love to hear your thoughts as well, but really just rather than identifying a symptom and then treating it with the corresponding symptom management or pharmaceutical, it's really asking why is that happening in the first place? How can we restore health from the root rather than just masking symptoms? And so what are your thoughts on conventional versus functional medicine? Any elaboration you have there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's really just two different approaches. So a doctor of naturopathy and a medical doctor learn like the same foundational stuff. But then a medical doctor then goes on to learn pharmaceuticals and the diagnosis of disease and the treatment of disease with pharmaceuticals. A naturopathic doctor learns how to basically work on so-called diseases or symptoms with natural health. And in my opinion, there is a big significance, at least a big significance for me, because I don't know how true this is, but I heard about 90% of people want to just take a pharmaceutical drug to then manage their symptoms. But there's about 10% of people who want to get to the root cause of their symptoms and understand why it is they develop these symptoms to begin with and work on those things and get the body healthy, because a healthy body can't be sick. So yeah, and that's something that I learned in the book, Natural Cures They Don't Want You to Know About, at least that different perspective, that change in perspective. But it's something that I really began and I'm still learning more and more about as I continue my education. It's like, it's called first principles theories. It's like you said, like a conventional medicine doctor would just give you some type of medication. You have IBS, like this is what it is. You know, there's nothing you could do about it.
An umbrella diagnosis, that just means we don't know why you are shitting your pants.
Exactly. Like many so-called diseases, right? But a disease is just an accumulation of symptoms that has been given a name, right? And it's just so that they can diagnose it and bill it to insurance and give you some type of pharmaceutical drug or treatment. But when you look at the root causes of,
it can be like so many different things.
It can be like, why are your bowels irritable? Like IBS, irritable bowel syndrome.
Even
why are they
PCOS or even like autoimmune conditions, what's like triggering them in people, and all of the sort of more like inflammation. Like, well, what's causing inflammation? Is it stress? Is it something you're eating? Is it something you're doing? Is it an environmental toxin? So there's lots of different contributors to what can look like one symptom can have many different root causes, but the one symptom is treated with one approach as opposed to exploring.
Exactly. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's the point that I wanted to mention is conventional medicine is usually like doctor centered and one size fits all approach. Whereas holistic or natural medicine, functional medicine, true functional medicine is a bio-individualized approach. Like you said, it could be due to inflammation, but if we're not using additional labs to just blood work alone, then we're not going to be able to identify what those culprits are. So for example, two people could have IBS with all this inflammation in their gut or their bowels, and that inflammation can be caused by several different things. It could be caused by chronic stress. It could be caused by heavy metal toxicity, mercury and aluminum. It could be caused by food sensitivities, anything. So really functional medicine is about using labs to identify those root causes, but also something called first principle thinking or first principle theory, which is you keep asking why until you can't anymore. Then you get to the root cause. So what are all these things that are causing the inflammation? We need to identify what they are with functional medicine lab testing. It could be food sensitivities.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said, just keep asking why. And I remember them talking about that a lot too in the program, where it's not just, this is what it is. It's like, well, why is that happening? Well, why is that happening? And you just keep going until you actually uncover a more personalized answer. And Bio-individuality, wanted to highlight that for anyone who missed it, is the idea that, one size doesn't fit all. It's essentially a term to explain that, and that different diets can work for or different ways of eating. We won't say diet, but different foods work for different people, and different types of exercise might be good at different points of your life, or different things might be more irritating. Different medications may have different side effects depending on predispositions, and knowing a little bit more on an individualized basis, and why, universal treatments can sometimes be a little scary because we're all different. And then
100%.
Yeah. And then another thing that you said too that really stood out to me was that 90% of people do actually just want to take a pill and to be done with it. And they just kind of want it to be over with. And that's such a poignant thing that is important to consider, because I personally always look at it and I think the same way you do, where I'm like, well, geez, like this makes so much more sense. Like holistic health, treat the symptom, treat the root, get to the root cause, cure it from the foundation, so that you don't have to keep masking symptoms and creating more symptoms and never really resolving the issue. But you make an important point that there's a lot of people that really maybe don't want to do the work that is involved in holistic health. And it's funny because I had an experience recently. I was telling you before we got on the podcast with the glucose tolerance test and failing it. And then the midwife telling me like, oh, sometimes really healthy people who eat really healthy fail the glucose tolerance test because of the dumping of sugar, and they're not used to it. And she's like, next time you can just do the test your blood sugar levels instead of taking the glucose tolerance test. And I was like, oh, well, I would have rather had done that if I had known it was an option from the beginning. Right. And to me, it was like, yeah, duh, I'd rather prick my finger 4 times a day, get to learn about my body and how food's impacting it, and get to learn more about like how different choices impact my blood sugar levels, how I can optimize that, and just learn more about the functioning of my body in general. And she's like, oh, really? Because most people would rather just drink the sugar drink and like move on with their life.
Yeah,
and
there you go.
Like, oh, yeah, I guess I didn't think that. Most people would rather do that, but it's a testament to our society as well. And that kind of just like immediate gratification, like can't be bothered, which is dangerous in a lot of ways because it's our health we're talking about. It's not like some minor inconvenience where it's like quicker just to do things the fast way is sometimes like, is it really worth like the shortcut sometimes?
Right. No, that's a good point. And I'm glad you brought that up because it reminded me of something else I wanted to mention. Part of like what got me interested in this is just, I don't know if that, I have to look into that data of like 90% versus 10% of people who are willing to actually do the natural health surprising modalities. But I think it does speak to my experience, and it sounds like yours too. Right. It's not surprising. But part of like what got me to even question conventional medicine or authority was actually being failed by authority figures. So I had mentioned earlier that, yes, like the conventional medicine approach to treating my tendinitis was not effective, but I had also been failed by the school system. And opportunities that were given to friends of mine, classmates to mine, were not given to me, right? So it was sort of like this accumulation of questioning, not rebelling, but questioning authority figures that encouraged me to just start questioning other authority figures, right? And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I encourage people to do that. I think it's healthy. Right? Because it's just a suggestion. It's just a question. It's not saying I'm going to defy an authority figure, but it's like, what if there's something new? What if there's something they missed? What if there's something they don't know about?
What if there's private interest? What if there's other reasons they want you to listen to them, so there's lots of things. And it sounds like basically what you're saying too is you just had enough experience where you were misguided by authority figures that gave you a healthy curiosity.
Yes.
Moving forward to be like, okay, maybe I don't live in a world where I should just do everything I'm told and not question anything.
Exactly. Spot on.
Yeah. Yeah, I know too, before we got on, we were talking a little bit about kind of the origination of conventional medicine with the Rockefellars. And you were telling me about the Flexner report.
Yeah.
And I really thought that was an interesting thing to share for listeners about just how the suppression of holistic medicine started and how it was kind of driven by the monetization of conventional medicine initially.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, it was one of the Rockefellars. I forget which one, but he was invested in pharmaceuticals. And he was looking for a way to increase profits. So he collaborated with media and he collaborated with government to hire a gentleman by the name of Abraham Flexner to do a report of all the medical schools at the time. So there were conventional medical schools, there were more holistic medical schools like osteopathic, naturopathic, homeopathic. And this guy just basically went around and reviewed all the medical schools and deemed conventional medicine as the gold standard of health and every other thing as quackery. So this eventually led to the shutting down of most holistic schools. And yeah, basically it was like a smear campaign. So it had the public believing and trusting those authority figures like media and government and pharma, right? All these brilliant minds and who are formulating these medicines to thinking that if I want to be healthy, I need to see a conventional medicine doctor. Mm-hmm. But the thing is like conventional medicine is so new. It's like if you look at the history of all medicine, like I think it's only about 1,000 years old, whereas something like Ayurveda has been around for 6,000 plus documented years. And it's funny when you think about the name alternative, right? People call it alternative like it's like a less ideal option. It's like, oh, I can't have the gold standard, so let me try something separate from the gold standard. But when you break down that word alternative, and you think about the word native, it's like a lot of these natural health modalities came from, or herbalism came from indigenous cultures. They were native people, right? So basically it's like what the point that I want to get across is
the opposite of what it really is.
It's exactly. It's flipped upside down. So, but the point I want to get across is like if you're looking to truly be healthy, there is no alternative to finding your root cause imbalances and addressing them. And those root cause imbalances that lead to any type of symptom basically boil down to two things. Either you have some type of nutritional deficiency or some type of toxicity. And those are sort of like umbrella statements because as a holistic practitioner, we know that the mind affects the body and the body affects the mind. So even things like mental and emotional stress affect our physiology. Mm. They spike cortisol, they put us in a stress state. And if we're like always dealing with mental and emotional stress, we're going to be in a sympathetic nervous system state and not the parasympathetic nervous system state, which is more rebuilding, more regenerative, more rest and digest. That's where we make hormones like testosterone and estrogen that keep our mood balanced, that keep us ambitious and have a drive and passion for life. Yeah, right?
Creative and imaginative too. Like everything that's non-essential is just down-regulated during activation of the sympathetic nervous system, like you said. So a lot of those systems that help our bodies thrive and our minds thrive are just shut down, and we're very much transferred into like a narrow vision of survival mode.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, so good. I really like what you were saying about the idea that many of alternative practices are actually like original practices by Native and Indigenous people. They've been around for years. And I think it's important to say that I do think that both are important in their own way, with conventional medicine being really great if you break your arm or you have an emergency or more of an acute situation. But it's almost become so overshadowing of the importance of taking care of yourself so that you don't have to rely so heavily on conventional medicine and
Exactly.
treatment approaches, as this like minimization of holistic health, when in reality, I can see why though, right? Because if you're emphasizing a route of health that actually takes you away from conventional medicine because you don't have to rely on it as heavily, then there's not as much financially lucrative opportunity for conventional medicine there. So although like they really both serve important roles, and holistic medicine can totally embrace conventional medicine for the role that it serves, it's a little bit harder for conventional medicine to embrace holistic medicine in some of the same ways, because it's like, well, you're funneling people away from us.
Exactly. That's a great point to make. And I try to be clear in my message that I'm not trying to disparage conventional medicine, but what I am trying to do is just inform people to understand the difference of services. So like you said, like, yeah, absolutely. Acute emergency-based circumstances, like you break your arm or you cut yourself, you have an accidental cut, you need to get stitched up. Like, there's no better option that we have available except conventional medicine. And I'm grateful that we have it for those reasons. But for everything else, like chronic based symptoms, the drugs that they're going to prescribe you are only going to mask your symptoms, and they're not intended to ever get to the root cause of your disease.
Right. And it's not empowering you with any bit of lifestyle change or, movement away from being reliant on those medications. They're made to be taken for life. They're not made to cure anything. It's made to create a customer for life.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and then that's where I think the important point is to note, like, there is important roles of both. Like you said, not here to disparage what conventional medicine brings to the table, but also to let people know in certain instances, you actually have a lot more options than just say going on medication for high cholesterol, and that's going to oftentimes be the first suggestion made by conventional practitioners or MDs, is going to be a pharmaceutical approach to things that could also be intervened as a first line of defense with lifestyle changes. So,
Exactly.
and that's by design. They don't have a lot of time to help you implement lifestyle changes. And I think a lot of this is changing with integration of more like health coaches and people that can walk people through behavior change, but it's really not even feasible for doctors to be able to sit there and be like, all right, here, you can take this medication for high cholesterol, or I can walk you through dietary changes. Like, there's no question that they can't do one.
Right. And that's the thing, is like, it's not their fault, right? Because there's a big distinction between pharmaceutical interests in making money versus the medical doctors and nurses that want to help people. They're brilliant people in respect to what they do. Absolutely. And I commend them for trying to help others. But it's just not their wheelhouse. It's just not what they're trained in to be able to help people with dietary and lifestyle changes. So, and also, like, they're limited in their time because of insurance. They have like 15 minutes with each patient. So even if they do some continuing education or research on the side to give them tips, that's great. But it's just not going to be as patient or client focused as a functional medicine practitioner or an integrative health practitioner or a naturopathic doctor will, because they'll literally sit with you for an hour at a time and go through everything that you're doing. How are you eating? How are you sleeping? How are you exercising? How is your mental and emotional stress? What's your job like? Do you have relationship stressors? Do you have financial stressors? All that stuff. Because in the example you brought up for someone who has cholesterol, a medical doctor might put them on a statin and be like, okay, this is going to lower your cholesterol. We dealt with the symptom, but they're not trained in asking, well, why do you have high cholesterol in the first place? And that could be due to elevated levels of stress, because when you are in the sympathetic nervous system state, or fight or flight, what happens is cortisol spikes, which is the stress hormone, and cortisol is a glucocorticoid. So one of the things that it does, the first part of that name there, gluco, is it releases glucose from the liver and tissues of the body into the bloodstream, because it's fuel. It's like instant fuel that can help you get into fight or flight and do whatever you have to do to get out of that stressor or survival, however your mind perceives that stressed situation as a survival state situation. It needs fuel. And one of the other things that it does is it also releases triglycerides from the liver. So cholesterol isn't necessarily something that you is an issue of consuming exogenously, which means like from outside and putting it in the body, like eating eggs and bacon. But it's something that it's an issue that's produced endogenously, which is by the liver when you're under high states of stress. And anything that causes inflammation is going to cause that spike in cortisol. So again, it's about working with the individual to figuring out what is causing their inflammation. Is it heavy metals? Is it parasites? Is it candida, yeast, or overgrowth in the gut? Because, it can be different for each individual.
Right. And regardless of the cause, just taking a medication for it, that cause is still occurring exogenously if your diet is messed up, or endogenously if you're still experiencing high levels of acute stress or chronic stress all the time. So to me, to even the idea of like masking symptoms while like the fire of disease is still burning just seems so harsh on our bodies. And I love how you always like say dis-ease. And my dad was a holistic chiropractor, and my mom always says that. He always said disease is caused by states of dis-ease. And I think it speaks so much to like the role that stress and, constantly just being in, whether it's through our physical choices or our mental state, when we have chronic states of dis-ease in our body where we're not in a balanced state of homeostasis, it accumulates to the expression of disease.
Yeah, 100%. I love that word too. And also, it is sort of like not really it has a dual meaning, because, right, dis-ease just means the body is not at ease. Ease is our natural state. When we're healthy, our body is at ease. We're not stressed, we're relaxed, we're regenerative, we have energy. But also because as a natural health practitioner, legally, I cannot I can't diagnose, I can't treat, I can't cure, I can't give medical advice for any disease, right? So, and again, going back to my point that I said earlier, it's like a disease is really just an accumulation of symptoms that's been given a name. So like, for example, you talked about autoimmune-based disorders earlier. Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune-based disorder for the thyroid, that name is literally just the name of the doctor who discovered the accumulation of symptoms. Mm-hmm. His name was Hashimoto, and he named that disease after himself. But the thing is like, one of the things that was important for me to hear, and I want to pass on, is like, if you identify with your disease, if it becomes a part of your identity, like I am someone who has an autoimmune disorder, I am someone who has Hashimoto's, it can be difficult to get around the mindset and have that success mindset, like I was talking about in the de-stress protocol, in order to have the faith and the hope that you can someday overcome that disease. However, when you just break it down to the symptoms can be worked on, right? You can work on, why is your immune system hyperactive? Why is it attacking your own tissues of the thyroid? And you can begin to use that first principle thinking, like we were talking about earlier, of keep continuing to ask why until you get to the root cause.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll find your answer.
Right. It's a lot more empowering to look at it as a set of symptoms that you can actually proactively work on, as opposed to looking at it as a umbrella label that you have now.
Exactly.
And that plays into the mind-body connection, our belief systems, the impact that our thinking about our physical health has on our physical health, which is all a whole nother freaking podcast.
Yeah, it's wild. It really is how much the mind affects the body. You know, it's Ayurveda talked about the energetic body and the spirituality aspect of it, right? Because holistic really means like mind, body, and spirit, but it also means like how, you know, the body is connected and how it affects everything is connected. That's another thing about conventional medicine is everything is specialized. Like you go to your cardiologist, or, you know, you go to your optometrist, or you go to your rheumatologist, you know, you go to all your different specialists. But the thing is like one thing in the body affects the other. So natural health, in the case of an autoimmune disorder, typically every autoimmune disorder has three main causes. It has leaky gut, it has some type of toxicity, and some type of stress. And it's all connected. So if you have stress, it can cause leaky gut. And if you have leaky gut, it can cause stress because there's the vagal nerve or the vagus nerve that connects the gut to the brain. And when we take antibiotics and it wipes out all our good gut bacteria, and we have this gut dysbiosis where pathogens can then take over, like parasites, like candida, like H. pylori, that stuff can cause inflammation of the gut. And then that inflammation,
the brain, the nerve.
Right, exactly. So then you're feeling bad because your gut health isn't good. You're getting stressed out because of this, your gut isn't healthy, right? And this stress is putting you into a sympathetic nervous state. So there's the stress component. But leaky gut also allows certain proteins from foods to seep through the gut wall, get into the bloodstream. And then the immune system goes crazy because it's like, what is all this stuff that doesn't belong here? Your gut is supposed to keep the bad stuff out and let the good stuff in. So when the bad stuff gets in, your immune system goes crazy. And because bacteria gets into the cells, because those proteins are similar molecularly to tissues in the body, it starts attacking its own tissues. Because it starts to think that the tissues are a pathogen because it doesn't belong there.
Yes, because getting through the epithelial cells in the intestinal wall, things are getting through that shouldn't. And so your body's recognizing it as a foreign invader as opposed to, or it's actually just kind of dysregulating your immune system by having these objects getting through that shouldn't be. And so, yeah, really, I love talking about the interconnectedness of mental health, physical health. The gut-brain axis is so good. If anyone's interested in learning more about the gut-brain axis, and I don't know if you've read this book, but it's called The Mind-Gut Connection by Emran Mayer. Have you read that book?
I haven't read the book, no, but I think I heard of the title.
It's a good book it's pretty approachable to read and just like understand pretty comprehensively, but also simplistically the connection between our mental health and how it's translated from our gut to our brain, and how like 90% of the information is actually going from our gut to our brain, which just tells you how important the composition of that microbiome is and the bacteria that we have there, because the communication is going way more up to the brain from the gut than it is from the brain to the gut to brain to instead of brain to gut. And that was surprising to me because you just think of the brain as the information center and that like it would certainly be sending more information to your gut, but it's actually the reverse. And so, yeah, I wanted to circle back to a couple of things. I won't keep you too much longer, but like 10 minutes or so. And then I wanted to ask about, I know we were talking about the role that the Rockefellars played in kind of disparaging holistic health, as you were saying earlier, and through this like connection of pharmaceutical companies and the media. And I'm wondering, like, what are your thoughts on how prevalent that interconnection is between like the media and pharmaceutical now?
So the media and pharmaceutical now, I think it's something like there's a pharmaceutical rep that sits on the board of every major media outlet.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's something like that. But even if you just look at the ads
Right.
from the media, it's like this, this broadcast was brought to you by enter pharmaceutical company name, right?
That remain nameless. No.
Yeah, that can remain
Voldemort.
But yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah.
and the thing is like, it's unfortunate. It's like, till this day, natural health has been given this view as it's inferior to conventional medicine. And it's because the model is very financially beneficial for pharmaceutical companies of keeping someone on medications for life. And expensive medications. The other thing is like, so to answer your question specifically about how much of a role that plays, it is very well still present in all major media outlets, which is why I don't even watch the news. Well, that's part of the reason why, because I know that I'm not going to get unbiased information from the news pertaining to my health. It's going to be biased. It's going to be something that is pushing some drug, most likely, and they're not going to talk about natural health modalities. They're just not. Because a healthy person doesn't need drugs, and therefore they're not a customer, yeah, it very well still plays a role, 100%. There's something else that I wanted to say on that note, but I forgot it. Maybe it will come back to me.
Especially with pregnancy brain. Sometimes I'm mid-sentence on the podcast. I'm like, well, too bad I don't know how to edit. So
we're just going with it. Improv.
Yeah, exactly. Don't worry about it, honey. Better you than me this time. So, yeah. So then I have a couple more questions that I wanted to touch upon that I think are important. One is, if you were to say, like, what is your ideal healthcare system, that capitalizes on the strengths of both, what would that look like?
So, all right. I'm glad you asked that question, because I sort of have like two answers to it. So first of all, unfortunately, our healthcare system is not a healthcare system, as we know, right? It's a sick care system. So it really is a play on words. And the reason I say it's a sick care system is because they don't teach you the information you need to know to remain healthy, to avoid getting sick. They just wait until you're sick and then they treat you, right? Whereas with a holistic or natural health, the goal is to work on your health before you get sick. Or if you are sick, look at those underlying root causes, right? So I just think it's important to define, like, make that distinction, because it's misleading. It really is. It should be called sick care, in my opinion. But how they could coexist together currently, I think, is like, or what would an ideal, that was your question, what would an ideal healthcare system look like? So yeah, it would be true healthcare. Like, the reason we can't run some of the labs out that I was talking about earlier, like the saliva test, the hair test, the blood test,
insurance,
right? Stool test, urine test. Yeah, it's because insurance only covers disease diagnosis labs. So,
meaning you already have to have a problem and the expression of symptoms before, and like a diagnosis before you can run additional lab testing. And I was actually listening to a podcast on that, talking about how a lot of doctors can get in trouble if they're like maybe more proactive. And it goes to show how bound doctors really can be with their treatment approach, because if you do proactively request labs and you're not showing a diagnosis that warrants requesting it, you can start to get insurance claim rejection or saying like, we're going to drop you if you keep recommending labs
Wow.
that aren't warranted. And it's like, but then we're waiting until people get sick to do it. So it's kind of like, it's hard because it's very dictated by
Exactly.
insurance companies and money.
Exactly. And, so in an ideal world, I think that we would have true healthcare. So all these functional medicine labs would be covered by insurance.
Mm-hmm.
All the food that they served at hospitals, they would be mindful of what goes in it. Are there GMOs? Is there cancer-causing pesticides that were used to grow the conventional plants, and vegetables, fruits and vegetables that are in those foods, right? Is there inflammatory additives, artificial colors?
Selling soda out of vending machines in the hospital.
It's wild. But I think if, we could offer functional medicine labs and have doctors, be more like functional medicine and be trained in the de-stress protocol, like diet and exercise, stress reduction, toxin removal, and all that stuff, then that would just be amazing. Everyone would be like if that were to happen overnight, if we could just like wave a wand and that happened overnight, you would start to see the increase in disease start to drop. Right. So like the 4 main causes of mortality are like cardiovascular issues, blood pressure issues, and stroke, type 2 diabetes, believe it or not, and cancer. But the third one, if I'm not mistaken, is actually not medical malpractice, but mistreatment of pharmaceuticals. So the more pharmaceuticals that you're on, you have a higher risk of mortality. Because of their
they don't know a lot of times how they're going to interact with one another, right?
Right. Yeah, that could. I'm sure that is one reason, and there could be just over prescribing or under prescribing. Yeah. I'm sure there are many factors at play, but all those things we would just start to see drop. All those, because they are preventable based on diet and lifestyle. Cancer is a little bit of a wild card because cancer can have a lot to do with toxicities. Like I said, glyphosate. I think there was just like they outlawed glyphosate in terms of being used in people's backyards or something like that, because there was a big lawsuit that was won. I don't know the gentleman's name, but he actually spilled Roundup, I think, which contains glyphosate on his hand and got full-blown skin cancer. So, and this is crazy. When pharmaceutical companies go to study cancer and create pharmaceuticals to treat cancer, they actually inject the mice that they're studying with a pesticide, with a specific pesticide to give them cancer, so then they can study how to treat cancer.
You're like,
that is, how backwards is that, right? It's like, we don't know why all these, it's like, we don't know why all these people we need to figure out how to treat cancer. It's like, well, that's one reason,
Yeah. And there's so much interconnection between like big agriculture, big food, big pharma, healthcare system, and the government. There's all of these corporations lobby for political backing. And so it's just really hard to deconstruct some of the things that are contributing to states of disease when they're also funneling people towards more money and a system that's profiting off of us not being well. And one big thing that I take away from like this conversation, but just in general, isn't like, because, it's so easy to be like, oh my God, like when you first start getting into holistic health and you go down all the rabbit holes, like, oh my God, like pharmaceuticals and the corruption and the like big agriculture and big food and like everything's killing us and all of that. But
right.
We've all, I'm sure we've both been there, but my whole thing is like, okay, well, all I can do is vote with my dollar, vote for products and things that I like want, that I want to support and that I feel like aligned with their vision. And, it's just really kind of looking at like, all right, well, this is the world that we live in. So are we going to be living in like constant fear, or just being part of the solution in whatever way we can in our everyday lives? And it actually was kind of leading to the next question, which I wanted to ask about the rise in autoimmune conditions and chronic disease. And I mean, we kind of are touching upon it now, like what contributes to that. And there's so many things in our environment these days that do, but ultimately it's not about like living in fear, being scared, but it's also not about living ignorantly either. And I think just providing like discussions like this where people can talk openly about these are the, why we're so funneled towards this particular system of care, and just being aware that these aren't your only options, that like you are going to be saturated with this option much more than this option, because this one profits much more. And you do have these options if you don't want to be on medication for your whole life. So it's not about like condemning one or like picking one or the other, but recognizing we actually have to be more of participants in our lives and our choices. Yep. And that like, we can't just expect that like that our best interests are at the heart of every system. We also don't need to live like in states of constant fear. Is just being empowered. And that's kind of how I see it. And even with healthcare systems, I always think of like collaborative between conventional medicine, like having doctors that see people for 15 minutes, but also being educated and like, okay, but now you need to go down the hall and see like the health coach or the nutritionist. If you want to just go on a medication, here you go. Or you have this option. So like truly giving people the options to inform themselves. Like you said, maybe a lot of big portion of people do just want to take a pill, and then they can still do that,
Right.
And then some people can be given the options that they didn't know that they had to become truly healthy. So
exactly.
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying. And it brings to my attention. It's like, I first want to say like, that rabbit hole you were talking about that people can go down when they start to hear about like all the different things that they need to avoid.
They are trying to kill us.
Right. It can be scary, but there's a saying I heard a long time ago. It's like, don't be scared, be prepared. So it's like, don't just bury your head in the sand. It's like, just because you can't do all you find out doesn't mean you shouldn't find out all you can do. Right. So I love that too. And I can't take credit for it. I think that's Jim Rohn who said that. But yeah, it's like once you learn what the problems are, then you can focus on what the solution is. So if anyone is feeling like, oh, this sounds like they're talking about too many problems, I don't know where to start. It's like well, I just want to. No, I'm just kidding. It's like I just want to say that. If you weren't born with it, then it can be resolved. Mm-hmm. Because it's not just like consuming one pesticide or being exposed to heavy metals. It's not just like one toxin on one occurrence. It's the accumulation of things over time that lead to the inflammation that then turn on the disease-based genes that we're predisposed to.
Right.
And it's epigenetics. Yeah. So a lot of conventional medicine doctors say you have this disease because of your genetics. But if you didn't have the disease when you were a teenager, why do you have them now as an adult or in middle age? There's something that turned them on. And that's called epigenetics. And that's basically how our diet and lifestyle influences our disease-based genes that turn them on and then lead to our symptoms that manifest in whatever way we're genetically predisposed to. So like my family, it's like type 2 diabetes, cancer, right? So like I need to always stay in homeostasis and balance to keep those epigenetic disease, with epigenetics, to keep those disease-based genes turned off, right? And what I think about what is the rise, is causing the rise of more autoimmune-based diseases is...
And chronic disease and
chronic disease is, it's definitely the toxins in our environment. I forget when it was published, but I think it was either the NIH or it was the World Health Organization. It might have been the World Health Organization. And I think don't quote me on this, but I think it was in 2012, there were 100,000 plus man-made chemicals, 50% of which were proven to be carcinogenic, meaning they cause cancer. Now I think it's upwards of 170,000 chemicals in our environment. These are things like BPA, phthalates, parabens, heavy metals, VOCs, pesticides, and they're in our tap water. They're in our foods, right? They're in the air that we breathe, right? The smog from industrial pollution, right? But again, not to scare anybody. It's like once you know these things, then you can make better decisions to clean the air in your home. Buy a water filtration system, get an air purifier, eat organic foods as much as possible. And lastly, do a functional medicine detox to keep your body, your liver, and the tissues in your body free of these toxins on a regular basis. Right. A regular basis meaning every quarter, every 12 weeks. For 7 days, just get all the toxins out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely one of my mottos is just give a teensy fuck on a consistent basis. I think for the average person, we're just used to trusting like everything. And if everyone gave the teensiest little fuck about all the choices that they're making instead of just blindly buying into big food or toxic products, whether especially for women with all these endocrine disrupting like personal care products, if we actually just applied like a slight bit of mindfulness to our choices, I think it would make a huge difference, not only on an individual health level, but also on the values of the companies that thrive and succeed versus the ones that don't. And we just have to not be quite as complacent in our choices. And if everyone did that just a little bit, I think it would make a huge difference, you know?
Absolutely.
So,
voting with your dollars is huge.
Yeah.
It's huge.
I'm a fan of voting with your dollar. I did go through my, rabbit hole crazy, like the world is in like this is a hellhole and we're all getting poisoned all the time. I've been there for sure, but yeah, it's just like it's not a fun place to be thinking in that way and just doing the best you can on a regular basis. And I always say just not getting overwhelmed when you first start trying to live a more holistic lifestyle and be more cognizant of the choices you're making. It's always overwhelming, but there's ways to like stagger the changes you're making and just kind of look at it as like a marathon, not a sprint, and realize, what can also kill you is being so stressed out about everything that's not good for you. And so there's a balance to be struck between our mental health and our physical health. And as we were talking about, it's all interconnected. But on that note, the last thing I wanted was 3 like simple tips if you were to give to just the average person that's like starting on their holistic health journey and wanting to know like what are the 3 like first simple adjustments you would make to optimize health? What would they be in their everyday life?
So the first one would be, is not actually related to actual techniques. It's related to mindset. Number 1, I think, would be to suspend disbelief. Meaning, if you don't believe that you have the power to reverse your symptoms or your dis-ease, start to surround yourself with information from experts, from real life practitioners who have worked with people who have the same health challenges you have. Start to educate yourself and things will just start to click. They'll start to make sense and you'll say, wow, this is something that's happening in real life. People just like me are getting healthy again. And they're not given this sentence of being on pharmaceuticals forever. Mm-hmm. So really challenge yourself to get out there and learn. And you could follow our pages, right, on Instagram. But I also want to give a shout out to my mentor, Dr. Stephen Cabral, who has been doing this work for many decades, like at least 20 years or so. And that's Stephen with a PH. He's the one who actually designed the program I took, the Integrative Health Practitioner course. But then also, if you're just like, all right, well, I'm in generally good health. I don't have a disease, but, I want to improve my health. then you can start to just think about what I said earlier. Think about the water you drink. Think about the food you eat. Think about the air that you breathe, and just start to make slow changes. You could buy like a simple Therasage filter, like a water counter pitcher, or you could get a Berkey. You could get an AquaTrue. Those are all good brands to filter your water. Make sure you're drinking clean filtered water, because tap water has heavy metals in it. It has recycled exactly, fluoride, chlorine.
They're calcifying your pineal gland.
It has toxins in it, right? So clean water, organic foods without any pesticides. Also follow the Clean 15 and Dirty Dozen. You can look that up on EWG's website. So if you can't afford specific organic foods, it'll show you the Clean 15 conventional foods that have the least amount of pesticide on it that you could buy instead. And then the Dirty Dozen will show you the most pesticide exposed that you should definitely 100%. So yeah, and also just a principle based tip is try to follow a diet that is Mediterranean based, gluten and dairy free. Because when you look at the blue zone cultures around the world, these are the longest living people around the world. They all have basically like a Mediterranean style based diet. So it's not like a ton of meat. It's a little bit of meat, animal foods, but it's mostly plant based. Tons of vegetables, healthy fats like nuts, avocado oil, avocados, olive oil, that kind of stuff, and gluten free grains like a little bit of rice, maybe potatoes like sweet potatoes. And then when it comes to that's the water, that's the food. And when it comes to air you breathe, just try to like open up your windows, get some fresh air instead of being in recycled air all the time. If you're spending time indoors, get outside. Or if you can get something like an Air Doctor Pro, which is an air filter that you could put in your home and cleans out the air. And you should really see, if you haven't seen like these filters, when they've been sitting in someone's house for a while, they get nasty. Mm-hmm. They get full of dust. They get full of probably mold,
skin,
pollen,
particles,
skin, pet hair,
and all the synthetic fibers that come off your clothes. Exactly. Yeah, John, my fiance, he's been on like a rampage about the synthetic fibers, and he's like, 90% of the particles in the air is polyester, shitty fabrics. I'm like, oh, good to know. Yeah, I got him going down the rabbit holes too sometimes. I'm like, oh yeah, how is it down there? I know I went down that one. Have fun.
yeah, exactly. But again, like if you keep your liver clean, if you stay detoxing on a regular basis, you don't have to be worried about these things, and you don't even have to guess if you're healthy. You can test. So in addition to your annual blood work that I recommend you run every year, because those things can show you if you're out of range, but they're not going to give you the reason why you have those imbalances like I talked about earlier. So if you have high cholesterol, you can rewind this video and see, like what are some of the things at a root causal level or underlying imbalance that can lead to high cholesterol. But those things, like it could be excess estrogen, it could be elevated levels of cortisol, it could be heavy metals or blood sugar dysregularity. Those things you're not going to find on blood work alone. Mm-hmm. So I would also recommend to people to run at-home functional medicine labs that are going to look at your hormones, your omega-3 levels. They're going to look at your cortisol. They're going to look at your heavy metal toxicities. And they're going to look at your food sensitivities, because food sensitivities cause inflammation. And inflammation is, again, what then turns on those disease-based genes that then manifest into a disease. So I highly recommend people at least check out what's called the Big 5 labs that I'm able to run with clients all the time, or that you can run. And you can find those at lugowellness.com/labs. Yeah. And it will give you more information about all the different labs that you can run in my practice.
Yeah.
Or even if you don't want to run them with me, you can check them out on, you could try to find an integrative health practitioner at integrativehealthpractitioner.org, or even reach out to a local naturopath and ask them if they could run the specific labs that are listed on that website, lugowellness.com/labs.
Yeah, I know. I was actually going to say, first of all, wealth of knowledge. Love it. Thank you so much for sharing. This is such a good podcast. And
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, honestly.
Yeah, so good. Drinking your filtered water over there.
That's right.
I was going to say, also before I ask where people can find you, I wanted to reiterate the EWG is such a great free resource, and it's always nice having free resources. The Dirty and Clean Dozen he mentioned, but it also has a product directory where you can look up personal care products and see like how they're rated. There's also my
Skin Deep. EWG Skin Deep.
Right, exactly. And so for women, especially like sunscreens, makeup, cosmetics, all that stuff is you can look up anything and see how it's rated based on the ingredients. And the more toxic it is, it'll be a red, yellow, green, whatever. My fiance's sister also recently showed me an app that is based off the EWG. It's called Yuka. YUKA. It has a carrot as the logo. It's super helpful. You can type in, it has a barcode scanner and also a search database, and you can type in food products or personal care products, and it gives you a rating very similar to the EWG, and it tells you exactly like what ingredients are causes for concern in that food or personal care product and why. So like what it's linked to. So you can really educate yourself on the products you're using in your home. I also went down a little barcode scanning bathroom tour after that app. I was like, oh my God. But,
like a detective, just like,
like
running around your house.
What the hell are you doing? Like, I have to throw out all of this shit in the bathroom. So the last thing, I know you mentioned the lab testing, Lugo Wellness Labs, but just tell us like all the places we can find you.
Okay, absolutely.
For anyone who wants to find you after listening to this. And also thank you again for coming on.
Thank you so much. Honestly, it's been a pleasure. If anyone, I'm honored to be on your show, Katie. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And if anyone wants to find me, you can go to lugowellness.com. That's my website. Or you could just find me on TikTok and Instagram at Lugo Wellness. And one last thing that I wanted to say about the labs is you can check them out at lugowellness.com/labs. But also, one thing that I like to tell people always, whether it's a client, typically clients, is like, I don't know everything, right? And I'm still learning, right? But if there's something that I don't know, I will research it and I will find it for you. I'll tell you what I know. I'll tell you what I don't know. And if I don't know it, I'll research it for you and get you that answer.
Isn't that refreshing?
I mean, it's something that I'd love to hear. It's like just knowing that someone is on your team, and they're going to do their best to get you the results that you deserve. But is there like, if this is posted on YouTube, like we could maybe include the links for the EWG resources in the description, because there's one other one for cleaning supplies. I don't know the exact link or address, but it's ewg.org/supplies/cleaning or something like that. And you can check out hand soaps. You can check out like a toxin-free wipes. Exactly.
Amazing. Yeah, we'll have to add that. Before I post it, I'll check in with you. You'll have to remind me.
Katie, and one last thing is, like, if anyone has any questions based on this interview or this podcast episode, also feel free to just shoot me a DM. Like, I'm always happy to like do the detective work and answer any questions that I can, because I believe that this is my purpose and my mission. I love to help others because rising tides lift all boats. Other people's success is my success and my success is theirs. We're trying to build a community here of like-minded people that we can connect with and not really feel alone in this unconventional alternative world.
Yes. Round of applause. Rising tides lift all boats. I'm going to have to remember that one. Well, thank you so much for being here. And this episode is full of so much knowledge. So I hope everyone enjoyed. And don't forget to like and subscribe and do all the things on YouTube and Instagram. And I hope you enjoyed. Let us know what you think. Bye, everyone.